All right, this is the key to the worksheet on verifying inverses algebraically. And so remember when verifying if two functions are inverses of each other algebraically, you've got to find f of g of x and then g of f of x. And if both of those are equal to x, then f of x and g of x are inverses of each other. So that's how you determine algebraically if two functions are inverses of each other. All right, so let's go to number one. So number one, we have this function f of x, which equals 2x cubed minus 5, and then g of x, which equals the cube root of x plus 5 divided by 2. All right, and so remember, if you want to determine if those two functions are inverses of each other, we have to determine what f of g of x is equal to and what g of f of x is equal to. And if they're both equal to x, then the two functions are inverses of each other. So for step one, let's go ahead and do this. For step one, let's go ahead and find f of g of x. All right, and let's see what that's equal to. So when I find f of g of x, remember to find this composition, this is a composition, so keep that in mind. To find this composition, you're going to substitute g of x into f. So g of x is this cube root function, so I'm going to say equals f of the cube root of x plus 5 divided by 2. And so what this tells me to do now is to go to my function f, and wherever I see the variable x, I'm going to substitute the cube root of x plus 5 divided by 2. So I'm going to substitute g of x. So I'm putting g of x inside the function f. So then this becomes 2 times, and in parentheses, I'm going to put this cube root function. So I get the cube root of x plus 5 divided by 2. Close the parentheses. Now remember, all of this is being raised to the third power, and that's important. And then minus 5. Now remember, when you're cubing a cube root, the cube root and the power of 3 undo each other. So what you have is just this radicand, x plus 5 divided by 2. And so your next step is to say 2 times x plus 5 divided by 2 minus 5. And then notice you're multiplying these two fractions here, 2 divided by 1 and x plus 5 divided by 2, and those 2's divide out. And so you have this. You have 1 times x plus 5, which is x plus 5, and then minus 5. And then 5 and a negative 5 are opposites of each other, so that adds up to be 0. And so you get x. All right, so therefore what you found is this. So therefore, I found this. I found f of g of x to equal x. All right. Now let's go ahead for step 2 and find what g of f of x is. So this time, instead of substituting g of x into f of x, we're going to substitute f of x into g of x. All right, so let's see what we get. So remember, two functions are inverses of each other if they undo each other. All right, so meaning that when you take g of x and substitute inside of f of x, then if those are inverses of each other, they undo each other, so meaning that you get x back. All you get is x. All right, but you gotta show all those steps. So step 1 was to do this first, and then step 2 was to take f of x now and substitute it into g of x. So step 2. So step 2 is you want to find g of f of x. All right, now remember from a previous lessons, this is a composition, so you got to find f of x first. So f of x, remember, is this function here, 2x cubed minus 5. So that becomes g of 2x cubed minus 5. And then what that tells me to do is I'm going to go to my function g, which is here, and wherever I see the variable x, which is right here, I'm going to substitute 2x cubed minus 5. So I get the cube root of, remember, I'm substituting f of x in place of x here. So I'm going to get 2x cubed minus 5 and then plus 5. So that's my numerator, and this numerator is being divided by 2. All right, so let's go ahead and simplify this numerator. So I get the cube root. Oh, don't forget, that's the cube root. So make sure you say cube root here. Because if you don't put the index 3, that's understood to be a square root. So the cube root of, all right, so negative 5 and a positive 5 is 0. So I get 2x cubed divided by 2. The 2's divide out, right? Those are 1s. So I get the cube root of x cubed. And remember, the cube root and the cube function undo each other. So you're left with x. So now what you found is this. So therefore, g of f of x is equal to x. All right, but what does that mean? All right, so you found this and you found this. What does that mean? You got to say something more. Well, what you now know is this. Since f of g of x is equal to x and g of f of x is equal to x, then you got to say, well, what does that mean? Well, this is what it means. So step 3. Since f of g of x is equal to x and g of f of x is also equal to x, then this means that f of x and g of x, so f of x and g of x are inverses of each other. And that was it. All right, that was it. And I also, when I gave you these problems, I gave you a resource to look at to make sure you understood what it meant to show that these two functions are inverses of each other, and to do that algebraically. So step 1, step 2. Don't stop at step 2 because you got to explain. So what? So you found this is equal to x, and you found this is equal to x. Now what? All right. All right. So that was number 1. So let's look at number 2. So number 2, we have these two functions. All right. So number 2, we have f of x is equal to the square root of x plus 5. So we have this function, which is a 1-to-1 function. And we have g of x, which is x squared minus 5. Now remember, x squared minus 5 by itself, if I use the domain of all real numbers, is not a 1-to-1 function. So if I wanted to have an inverse, then I've got to restrict the domain. And so we said for x greater than or equal to 0. All right, so that's why we had that restriction here, because otherwise this parabola would not be a 1-to-1 function. So it would not have an inverse. All right, so let's go ahead and do our steps. Step 1, find f of g of x. All right, so let's see what that's equal to. Okay, so remember, if those are inverse of each other, if I take g of x, substitute f of x, they're going to undo each other. So I'm going to get x back. So let's see if I do. So that's f of g of x is this x squared minus 5. And then, so this means I go to my function f, and wherever you see the variable x, I'm going to substitute x squared minus 5. So I get the square root of x squared minus 5, minus 5, and then plus 5. Now when I simplify the radicand, the 5 and a negative 5 add up to be 0, right? So I get the square root of x squared. And remember, the square root and the square function undo each other, and so you're left with x. So therefore, what I found is this. So therefore, f of g of x is equal to x. All right, now, that's not enough to show that those two functions are inverse of each other. All you've done was to take g of x and substitute into f of x. You got to go the other way as well. So you must do a step 2. So step 2 is I've got to find f of g of x. And so g of x, I already found that, right? So step 2 is I got to find g of f of x. Sorry. All right, so now I got to find f of x, which is already given. That's the square root function. So it becomes g of the square root of x plus 5, right? And so then this tells me I go to my function g, which is this quadratic function, and wherever you see the variable x, I'm going to substitute the square root of x plus 5. So I get this. I get x, which I'm going to substitute f of x, which is the square root of x plus 5. But remember, I'm squaring that, so don't forget to put the square right there, and then minus 5. So everything you write must be mathematically correct. Now remember, the square and the square root undo each other, so you're left with the radicand. So I get x plus 5 and then minus 5. And then remember, these add up to be 0, 5 and negative 5, so that equals x. So what you found is that this composition here is equal to x. So therefore, g of f of x is equal to x. All right, so what does that mean? You found this, you found this. What does that mean? So that's your explanation also. In step 3, you got to say since f of g of x is equal to x and g of f of x is equal to x, then this means then f of x and g of x are inverses of each other. That's what that means, inverses of each other. All right, so that was number 2. All right, number 3. Okay, so number 3, we have these two functions. So f of x is equal to x minus 7 divided by 5, and g of x is equal to 5x plus 7. All right, so if I want to determine if those two functions are inverse of each other algebraically, remember our steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3. So step 1 is I've got to find f of g of x. So I need to know when I substitute my function g into my function f, what do I get? What do I get back? All right, so this means f of g of x is this linear function, 5x plus 7. And so this means I go to my function f, which is also a linear function, and I'm going to substitute 5x plus 7 where we see the variable x. So I get 5x plus 7. This part here is 5x plus 7. Remember, you're subtracting 7, so that's your numerator, and then you divide by 5. Combining like terms, 7 and negative 7 is 0, so you get 5x divided by 5. The 5's divide out, and you get x. So therefore, what you found is that when you take g of x and substitute into f of x, you're always going to get x back. So f of g of x is equal to x. So they undo each other. But remember, you got to also take f of x and substitute g of x. So step 2 is you have to find g of f of x. All right, so f of x is x minus 7 divided by 5. So it'll be g of x minus 7 divided by 5. And then this means I go to my function g, and where we see the variable x, which is right here, I'm going to substitute x minus 7 divided by 5, because remember, that's f of x. So I'm taking f of x, I'm going to substitute it into g of x. So I get 5 times x minus 7 divided by 5, right? So 5 times, and then I got to substitute f of x, which is this right here. Don't forget the plus 7. All right, simplifying, the 5's divide out. So 1 times x minus 7 is x minus 7, and then plus 7. A negative 7 and 7 is 0, and you get x. All right, so when you take f of x and you substitute g of x, that's equal to x. All right, but what does that mean? So when you took f of x, substitute and substitute into f of x, you got x. And when you took f of x, substitute g of x, you got x. What does that mean? So step 3. Step 3, since f of g of x is equal to x, and also g of f of x is equal to x as well, then f of x and g of x are inverses of each other. That's what that means. And that's it. All right, so that is the key to this worksheet.